Hi, I'm Raisa Marie Fronda and I'm here to talk about angular modulation. But before we start, we should make sure that we have some basic understanding about the definition of angular modulation.
So, what is angular modulation? Angular modulation is a class of carrying modulation that is used in telecommunication transmission system. It process in which the frequency or the phase of the carrier varies according to the message signal. Angular modulation is resistant to propagation induced selective fading because amplitude variations are not important. It is very efficient in rejecting interference and it minimizes the effect of amplitude noise on the signal transmission. Also, it allows for more efficient use of transmitters' powers. Angular modulation is further divided into frequency modulation and phase modulation. Frequency modulation. It is the encoding of information in a carrier wave by varying instantaneous frequency of the wave. The term and technology are used in computing, signal processing, and telecommunications, while phase modulation is a modulation pattern for conditioning communication signals for transmission. It encodes a message, signals as variation in the instantaneous phase of a carrier wave. What are the differences between angular modulation, frequency modulation, and phase modulation? In angular modulation, a radio wave is known as the carrier or carrier wave. It is modulated in amplitude by the signal that is to be transmitted, while in frequency modulation, a radio wave is known as the carrier or carrier wave is modulated in frequency by the signal that is to be transmitted. Now, let's proceed in mathematical equation of a frequency modulation and phase modulation. Frequency modulation is a form of angle modulation where the frequency of the carrier is varied in accordance with the instantaneous value of the intelligence signal, where it is an instantaneous value of FM signal. Angular frequency of carrier. Angular frequency of intelligence. Modulation index and peak amplitude of carrier. Let us now proceed in phase modulation. It is a form of angle modulation where the phase of the carrier is varied in accordance with the instantaneous value of the modulating signal, where it is an instantaneous value of PM signal. Max amplitude of the carrier. Carrier angular frequency. Modulation index. For phase modulation, maximum phase shift caused by intelligence signal. Last is intelligence angular frequency. Now, let's move on to the definition and equations of the following. Frequency modulation index. The frequency modulation index is equal to the ratio of the frequency deviation to the modulation frequency. From the formula and definition of the modulation index, it can be seen that there is no term that that includes the carrier frequency, and this means that it is totally independent of the carrier frequency. Now, let's proceed in frequency deviation. Frequency deviation is used in frequency modulation radio to describe the maximum difference between an FM modulated frequency and the nominal carrier frequency. It is also the amount of change in the carrier frequency produced by the modulating signal. The carrier frequency swings between maximum and minimum as the input varies in its amplitude. In deviation ratio, whenever the maximum allowable frequency deviation and the maximum modulating frequency are used in computing the modulation index, the amount of change in the carrier frequency produced by the modulating signal. It is also the expression of the worst-case modulation index. Now, let's proceed in FM equation using Bessel functions, where it stands for carrier amplitude, carrier frequency, modulating frequency, and modulation index.